Okay, I think we'll make a start. So welcome, thank you all for coming. So we'll do a quick acknowledgement of country first. So we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship to the Kaurna people, to country, and we respect their value and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and their cultural beliefs. My name is Felix. I'm the president of the Politics and International Relations Association, PIRA, at the University of Adelaide. I'm delighted to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Shingo Yamagami, together with Madam Kaoru Yamagami, wife of the Ambassador, Mr. Shimada Junji, Consul General, Consulate General of Japan in Melbourne, and all of the representatives from the Embassy of Japan. Welcome to the University of Adelaide. I'd like to welcome you all to the second series of our Meet the Leaders event, in which our students and staff will have the opportunity to hear from international leaders and discuss issues of global importance. I thank Professor Jacqueline Lowe, the Pro Vice-Chancellor International, and Dr. Priya Chacko, Head of Department of Politics and International Relations, and my wonderful team at the Politics and International Relations Association, who have supported in the organisation of this event. These events will be a regular feature of our campus activities moving forward. Today, Ambassador Yamagami will discuss Japan-Australia relations in the Indo-Pacific region. Following from the Ambassador's talk, time permitting, Dr. Priya Chacko will be moderating and open the floor to questions. I'd now like to invite Professor Jacqueline Lowe, our Pro Vice-Chancellor International, to formally introduce the Ambassador. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Felix. Good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful to see so many of you here today. Especially warm welcome to our delegation headed by His Excellency Mr. Yamagami, Ambassador of Japan to Australia, the delegation both from the Embassy in Melbourne and also the Consulate General of Japan based in Melbourne, Mr. Junji Shimada. Welcome to you all. It is an absolute delight to be able to say a few words to introduce His Excellency Mr. Yamagami, Ambassador of Japan to Australia. His Excellency, prior to his posting to Australia, His Excellency served as Director General, Economic Affairs Bureau at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He worked previously as Director General, Intelligence and Analysis Service, 2017 to 18. Ambassador Yamagami has served overseas in diplomatic postings to the UK as Political Minister, Geneva, Switzerland as Economic Counselor for the Permanent Mission to the UN and international organizations, to Hong Kong as Consul, and to the USA as Second Secretary. Outside of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yamagami has held roles as Director General at the Japan Institute of International Affairs and Director of Police Administration at the Ibaraki Prefectural Police during a secondment to the National Police Agency. Ambassador Yamagami has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Tokyo, one of our partner universities, and studied at the Graduate School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. So please welcome the Ambassador.
Well, thank you, Professor Lowe, for kind introduction. I feel like I'm back. My university or graduate school days, but it was a galaxy ago. But watch out, you may be like me, in a few seconds. Well, Pro Vice-Chancellor Professor Lowe, Head of the Department of Politics and International Relations, Dr. Chacko, Emeritus Professor, Jane, my friend, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. It's wonderful to be here in Adelaide for the first time, particularly at this prestigious university where many famous graduates with Japanese ties have studied. As you may know, Japan's first astronaut to take part in the official Japanese space program, Mr. Mori Mamoru, completed his doctorate here. Celebrated chef Mr. Adam Liao who was appointed Goodwill Ambassador for Japanese cuisine, also started off his brilliant career here. I'm tempted to enroll myself, particularly far better than University of Tokyo and Columbia, particularly after learning that you have an on-campus vineyard and Australia's largest teaching winery. Unfortunately, I arrived in Adelaide just a little late for South Australia's largest Japanese event, the Kodomo no Hi Festival, a Children's Day festival. I hear that many students of this university volunteer their time towards its success. By the way, are there any volunteers here today? Oh, look at this. Oh, amazing, amazing. That's fantastic. Thank you for playing an important role in the promotion of the Australia-Japan friendship. As the festival state of Australia, I'm confident that South Australia would be more than qualified to put off a fantastic Japanese festival. Today's topic, Japan-Australia relations in the Indo-Pacific region, is of paramount importance. To say that our future rests with the Indo-Pacific would not be an exaggeration. For Japan and Australia, this fact is indisputable. The Indo-Pacific region is our home, but as Prime Minister Scott Morrison has rightly pointed out, it is also the region that has accounted for 2/3 of global growth over the last decade. So, in fact, you could say that the future of the international community is deeply intertwined with the Indo-Pacific. Today, I would like to speak to you about what Japan and Australia can do together for the region. The Indo-Pacific accounts for more than 60% of both the world's total GDP and population. It is the epicenter of potential world economic growth. And it is this geographical sphere that Japan and Australia have built up our prosperity through our mutual commitment to the rules-based trading system. Though bilateral trade existed between us as far back as the 19th century, we first gave it a framework 6 decades ago through our commerce agreement. Then, in order to further liberalize trade, we signed the groundbreaking Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement, which covered not only trade in goods, but also trade in services and investment. Thanks to our openness to one another, Japan enjoys the status of Australia's largest #1 trading partner for over 40 years. Today, exports to Japan account for around 10%, or $90 billion of Australia's total trade. But the benefits do not end there. The liberalization of our trade helped to forge a deep trust between us. Our biggest leaders were given confidence in the market and an eagerness to invest. Indeed, Japanese direct investment has more than doubled over the past 12 years. Today, Japan is the second largest source of foreign investment in Australia, providing a remarkable $131 billion worth of total stock value. Here in South Australia alone, Japanese companies such as NEC, Asahi Kasei Homes, and Hitachi Zosen have invested in the local economy. Last year, Japan's MUFG Bank signed an MOU with the state government covering resources, energy, food, wine, space, healthcare, and international education. This MOU will provide further support for Japanese companies to invest in South Australia. The liberalization of our bilateral trade has also spurred on local job creation. According to one calculation, over 74,000 jobs have been created here in Australia by Japanese companies. Mitsubishi Motors, for example, who have been headquartered in this state for over 40 years, have recently opened a new office at Adelaide Airport, which will house more than 200 employees. But the question is, how can we ensure that our entire region enjoys such prosperity? The answer is crystal clear. It is through a free and open Indo-Pacific supported by a rules-based trading order. In recent years, Japan has been pursuing a foreign policy based on the vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Through the improvement of regional connectivity, infrastructure development, trade and investment, Japan has been striving to ensure this international public good brings prosperity to all. What is good for the region is good for the international community. I know Australia believes this, because it was together with Australia that Japan became the driving force behind the establishment of APEC, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. It is also together that we are working towards expansion of so-called CPTPP, Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. Japan and Australia continue to unite our efforts to support the rules-based multilateral trading system for the good of our region. We are working closely towards reform of the World Trade Organization. In bilateral talks last year, Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga publicly agreed that the trade should never be used as a tool to apply political pressure, and to do so undermines trust and prosperity. It's written in the bottom half of this slide. This is a very, very strong message. This was a message that Japan and Australia delivered together to the international community. We have been reminded in recent times that diversification of trade is essential for prosperity. We all know the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is like telling grandma to suck an egg, right? But perhaps it should be, don't export all your premium wine to one country. I'm a wine drinker. There are over 30 million regular wine drinkers in Japan, just waiting for someone to introduce them to the delights of good Barossa Valley Shiraz. The good news is that the groundwork has already been laid for an Australian wine boom in Japan. Our free trade agreement has steadily reduced tariffs, Japanese tariffs on Australian wine. As of April this year, the pre-EPA Economic Partnership Agreement bottled wine tariff of 15% has been completely eliminated. Yet imports of Australian wine to Japan have not increased relative to their potential. What a disappointment. Instead, what's more disappointing is wines from France, Italy, and Chile. Italy wine, French wine, Chile wine line the shelves of Japanese bottlers. It would be wonderful if sales of wine in Japan could contribute more to the South Australian wineries affected by the Black Summer bushfires. As much as I love being able to have a nice glass of Jacob's Creek in Tokyo, what I'd really like is to be able to enjoy the full range of SA wines from a fancy Penfolds to Berry Estate's Fruity Lexia. As a state where Goon was first patented back in 1965, I expect more of South Australia. So come on, SA. Let's make this happen. I have spoken to you about prosperity. Now, let me turn my attention to prosperity, and we cannot envisage prosperity without peace and stability. So let's turn our eyes to peace and stability from prosperity. Japan and Australia understand that these are vital precursors to growth in our region. We expressed our dedication to this end at the historical first ever leaders meeting of the Quad, just under 2 months ago. There, our two nations, along with the United States and India, agreed to support principles such as the rule of law, freedom of navigation and overflight, peaceful settlement of disputes, democratic values, and territorial integrity. Following on from this, just last month, Prime Minister Suga of Japan became the first foreign leader to visit newly elected US President Joe Biden. The two leaders recommitted to working with partners such as Australia and India to build a free, open, accessible, diverse, and thriving Indo-Pacific we all seek. For this, Japan and Australia are well placed to cooperate both multilaterally and bilaterally. As a natural consequence of the deep trust built up through decades of trade and investment, Japan and Australia's relationship has been elevated to a special strategic partnership and diversified to include cooperation in areas like defense and intelligence. Here in Adelaide, Japanese company NEC has established a global security intelligence center, providing security services to defense departments all over the world and helping South Australia to achieve global prominence in the cybersecurity field. My experience as a former head of the intelligence and analysis service of the Japan's foreign ministry, simply put, I used to be a spy. Tell me a lot about what I feel about this cooperation from Australia. Personally, I feel very, very grateful to Australia for its security and intelligence cooperation. I can't divulge any sensitive information, but I can tell you, we still haven't figured out why South Australians put pies in pea soup, nor why you call them floaters when they actually sink. Through the new level of close cooperation that our neighborhood relationship provides, we are promoting peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Today, Japan and Australia regularly participate in joint exercises. This year alone, our nations undertook a joint transit in the South China Sea concerning North Korea's nuclear weapon and missile development. Australia and Japan concentrated on the prohibition of ship-to-ship transfers in the East China Sea. Japan and Australia also participated in Exercise Malabar, a naval exercise initiated by India with cooperation with the United States. So 4 countries, Australia, India, United States, Japan joined. For Australia, this was historically significant as it marked its first participation in 13 years. Negotiations on the Australia-Japan Reciprocal Access Agreement have now entered their final phase after it reached in principle agreement during Prime Minister Morrison's visit to Japan last year. Joint exercises have already been performed in places like Queensland, the Northern Territory, and Japan's Hokkaido. It's no secret that South Australia is home to a number of defense bases. Once the Reciprocal Access Agreement, so-called RAA, is concluded, opportunities for Japan's self-defense forces to visit here for training may also rise. As you might know, Japan is eager to cooperate further with Australia in the manufacturing of defense equipment, an industry I know SA prides itself on. And so, whilst I'm always astonished by the beauty and tranquility of the Australian Ocean, I can't help but think it would be even more beautiful and quiet with South Australian manufactured Japanese submarines in it. long overdue dream. The first ever leaders meeting of the Quad also identified emissions reductions as a priority for the Indo-Pacific. Here again, I strongly believe Japan and Australia can work together to contribute. Our two nations share a vision for a low-emission future. And with a long history of economic complementarity in the resources sector, we are natural partners in the global fight against climate change. Only a few months ago, I had the pleasure of attending the commencement ceremony of the world's first global hydrogen supply chain project. And I must tell you, the sheer scale of this project is astonishing. Pioneer technology is being used to produce and transport hydrogen all the way from Victoria's Latrobe Valley to Kobe, Japan. Driven by an all-Japanese multi-industry consortium, this project's success will have an enormous impact. As the first jurisdiction to release a hydrogen strategy as early as 2017, South Australia has always been ahead of the game in recognizing the great potential of hydrogen energy. Premier Marshall made it his priority on his trip to Japan last year to discuss collaboration in hydrogen production and transportation with the University of Tokyo and energy company representatives. And did you know that some of your homes may soon be powered using hydrogen? I was intrigued to learn that the South Australian government plans to try out the use of hydrogen gas to power 700 homes starting this month. In particular, Japan is excited about South Australia's endeavor to create the largest green ammonia plant in the world. As a low-cost alternative to the transport of hydrogen, green ammonia is a potential game-changing fuel. The $240 million Air Peninsula Gateway Hydrogen Project, backed by the state government, is being developed by pioneer Australian company H2U. Having recognized the value of such an endeavor, Japan's Mitsubishi Heavy Industries has provided financial muscle through a capital investment into H2U. Ammonia has been singled out by the Japanese government in its 2020 New International Resource Strategy. But it is not only the government. Japanese companies also hold great expectations for this pioneer technology. Japan's Green Ammonia Consortium represents a significant force for the implementation of this energy in Japan and beyond. I, for one, am excited, and I hope that you are too. The vast potential of hydrogen and green ammonia could very well be the key to reducing emissions, benefiting not just our two nations, but our entire Indo-Pacific region. Along with the US and India, Japan and Australia have also committed to supporting countries in the Indo-Pacific through the difficult circumstances of this global pandemic. Together with our Quad partners, we will strengthen and assist our neighbors through the provision of at least 1 billion doses of vaccines. As two nations who have been successful in preventing our health systems from being overwhelmed, we are well placed to assist the region. Throughout the pandemic, we have continued to balance the health and economic well-being of our two nations by looking for new frontiers of economic cooperation. We have not allowed necessary but strict health restrictions to stagnate our cooperation. Did you see, for instance, the dazzling blaze of light that has streaked across the South Australian outback last December? Japanese space agency JAXA's Hayabusa 2 capsule landed in Umera. This created an opportunity for the people of Japan and Australia to forget about their pandemic woes and look to the stars. Under the volatile circumstances of Adelaide's sudden lockdown, It was only because of the dedication of our two nations' stakeholders that this mission was able to succeed. With the opening of the Australian Space Discovery Centre in Adelaide and the announcement that SA would be the $12 billion space capital of Australia, there are sure to be even more opportunities for us to cooperate. The vaccine rollouts in our region also signal that resumption of travel is becoming more attainable day by day. Tourism is, of course, a vital source of economic prosperity for the Indo-Pacific. Travel between Australia and Japan is likewise central to our economic relationship. Just a few weeks ago, a special Tasting South Australia campaign was held in Tokyo, boasting over 40 wines from this state's greatest vineyards. So I'm certain that there are a great number of Tokyoites keen to head on over for a true Kangaroo Island or Adelaide Hill cuisine experience. Australians who visit Japan are also an important asset to Japan's tourist market. You might be surprised to hear Australians spend the largest amount of money per person and have a long average stay of 13 days. Now, can I get a show of hands from anyone who has been to Japan? Oh, amazing, amazing. Thank you, thank you. Keep your hands raised if you stayed for more than 30 days. More than 13 days? Amazing. Wow, wow, wow. Well done for bringing up the average. Next time you go, please take a bottle of South Australian wine to promote. Can I get another show of hands from anyone who has visited the Himeji Garden in Adelaide? Great, great. All right, and who here has visited Himeji City in Japan? Oh, more. What a surprising result. So there are more people who have flown to Japan than have slowed down Glen Osmond Road. I'm so happy to see how keen you are to visit Japan. Some of you may be thinking that it's too expensive for you to visit Japan on a holiday. To you, I would say that Japan has in place a wonderful program known as JET, Japan English Teaching Project, in which you can live in Japan for 1, 2, or even 5 years whilst being paid for it. So please make utmost use of this JET program as well. So Japan has already been recognized as a potential partner for Australia in the future travel bubble. Once Japan and Australia resume travel, we will be even better placed to cooperate to support our Indo-Pacific neighbors in their fight against the pandemic. To conclude, I would like to reiterate that our shared values and strategic interests, such as trade, strategic interest in areas such as trade, defense, emissions reduction, and our response to the pandemic have situated us as natural partners in supporting our region. I, for one, am determined to do my utmost to strengthen our ties and uphold our shared values in order to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, which benefits us all. I do hope that you will join me in this endeavor. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ambassador. That speech was at once serious, rousing, and entertaining, and which is quite a feat. So thank you so much for that wonderful talk. We now have some time for questions from the audience. So does anyone want to get us started?
Yes.
No? A little bit shy? Okay. One question up here.
We're all committed to an open, free and open Indo-Pacific. Should Australia and Japan take a more coordinated response in relation to the Taiwan issue?
Can I answer?
Difficult.
Oh,
to
difficult.
begin with.
Right to the point. I know how good
I believe.
how good the students of University of Adelaide are. Tough question. My simple answer is I think so. I think so. There is a lot we can do together, because I talked about Indo-Pacific, and some pundits would say Taiwan Strait issue is just between mainland China, PRC, and Taiwan. I think it's a bit too myopic to see it that way. And what will happen over the Taiwan Strait will very much affect the peace and stability of the Indo-Pacific region as a whole. Well, you need to think about Taiwan has a population. Everybody thinks in comparison with mainland China, Taiwan is a small entity. But Taiwan enjoys a population of 23 million people, very close to Australia's 25 million people. So if my Taiwanese friends were once telling me, if Taiwan is put in Europe, it's economically it is as big as Poland. So Taiwan is a vibrant democracy. So I think this peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait is very, very important. That's what Japanese Prime Minister Suga and US President Joe Biden agreed when Suga-san visited Washington just a few weeks ago. So in a nutshell, I agree with you. And Australia has been very, very active in contributing to the peace and stability of the South China Sea. We have conducted a number of joint exercise drills amongst Aussies, Americans, and Japanese. And now the issue is not necessarily South China Sea, but we have to pay consideration to what's happening in the East China Sea as well. In that regard, Australia being a global power, there is a lot Australia and Japan can do together. After all, we do share basic values such as democracy, the rule of law, market economy, respect for human rights. But not only that, the great strength of our bilateral relationship comes from the fact that we have common strategic interests as well. That's why I use the word natural partners in my presentation. So here again, there is a lot we can do together. But thank you for your great question.
Professor James,
thank you, Ambassador. You have been referring to Australia as a great power. Can you explain? I mean, we have heard Australia as middle power, significant power, but never ever anyone has used that term. So what exactly?
Thank you, Prudendra. He is a good friend of mine, and he's also very, very tough-minded too, and right to the point. To be precise, I use the term global power, not great power, global power. Of course, I already think Australia is great enough. You don't have to make Australia great again. You don't need such a politician. Am I okay? Anyway, the point is, I think Australia is far more than a middle power. Yes, your population may not be so big compared with, say, for example, G7 countries, and your manufacturing, history may not be, solid. But if you look at this way, am I being too blunt? Sorry, I'm no ordinary diplomat, I was a former intelligence officer and I am a former policeman. So sorry, no more wishy-washy, diplomacy talk. But let me tell you, whenever I see my counterparts in the intelligence services, military service, I'm always impressed by Australia has got to offer. Intelligence service is very, very robust. Military, very agile, small but very agile and quite modern. Besides, OGs are anywhere in the world. See, London, New York, Paris, Tokyo, they are quite internationally minded, running big corporations, NGOs, and so on. So given the soft power of Australia as well, look at Hollywood movies too. Many Japanese moviegoers regard them as Hollywood actors and actresses, but we all know, where Mel Gibson, Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, Nicole Kidman, Kate Blanchett, Naomi Watts are from. See, so if you look at this kind of soft power as well, Australia is far more than a middle power. So I call it a global power. I think Australia and Japan are countries of modesty, countries of understatement. So you would like to put yourself in the category of middle power. But sometimes that might not serve your interest. There are some countries who would like to look at the regional order in a hierarchical manner. Once you define yourself as a middle power or a small power, you might put yourself susceptible to coercion or bullying. That's the cold reality of international politics. So with a bit of encouragement, I keep on telling my Aussie friends, you are a global power. That's my intention. And Japan is also a global power. Two global powers can do a lot together.
Economic cooperation is important to the post-pandemic recovery. Could we expect a Japan and Australia free trade agreement coming soon, as well as more open immigration policies?
First of all, when it comes to free trade agreement, we already have a free trade agreement between Australia and Japan in two regards. One, we have bilateral agreement. It's called JIPA, Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement, which was concluded several years ago. And on top of that, we are both important members of TPP. Even when Trump administration decided to withdraw from TPP, we remained in the TPP, and we did our best to hold other countries together. So in terms of free trade agreement, we have already two frameworks to take advantage of. So there is a lot of more room for Australia exposed to Japan and Japanese exposed to Australia. Incidentally, I talked about the importance of the investment. Quite often, Aussies are so preoccupied with the economic clout of one Asian nation. But when it comes to investment, three investment powers are US, Japan, and UK in Australia. These three are biggest investors in Australia, creating jobs, creating business opportunities. So, we need to be careful. And also, when you talk about free trade agreement, this does not come without efforts. I brought the example of South Australian wines export to Japan. Great wine of Australia are all exported to Japan's Asian neighbor. It doesn't come to Japan. We feel lonely. So give us some more Australian wine, good wine. So things like this. Immigration, yes, we have different systems. We have two different societies. Japan, already in a small land. Japan's size is about 1/20th of Australia. And Japan's population, 126 million, is 5 times. So land size, 1/20th, and population 5 times. That means wherever you go in Japan, if you find 100 Japanese are living, In Australia, only 1 people are living. There is a big difference in terms of density of population and also how the country is made of, whether they are primarily made of immigrants from other places, or whether your country is made of indigenous people. I think history is different too. So we cannot compare one country's immigration policy to another. But here again, we can learn from each other's experiences too. And in that regard, let me tell you, this is no immigration, but Australia's handling of COVID, this really stands out. I've been in the Foreign Service for 37, 38 years, but Australia's handling is remarkable. And I think this did a lot of service to Australia's reputation, prestige, and fame throughout the international community. So here again, you can be proud of your achievement, and you can call yourself a global power.
So do you think that Japan and Australia have anything they could learn from each other, or they could both learn about the challenges of an aging population?
We can learn from each other's experience, and also we can, let me put it this way. I think Southeast Asia and the Pacific Island countries are 2 important stages for our bilateral cooperation. For example, we are now helping, the government of Papua New Guinea, their financial, resource shortages, fiscal deficit, or they are suffering from pandemic. This is one way. And yes, when it comes to infrastructure development, this is another area we can help.